Good morning, this is Judy Miller, the Environmental Program Manager for the Urbana Park District. Today I'm going to take a hike and take you along through Meadowbrook Park, parts of it. Here we are at the Ray Street entrance, and we'll take a walk down the Hickman Trail for a bit to see what we can find today. Directly across from the exhibit that we just saw is the entrance, a circular path around the corn crib. This is an original farm building of the McCulloch farm that's used mostly for storage, but also as a feature around the sensory garden. Plants that have been planted here are planted for their variety of sensory involvement that you can have. So not just for color, but your sense of smell and texture. You'll also find some sculptures on the corn crib. The farmhouse is a Park District residence where one of the staff can live and help to monitor the park. This is early September, so everything's still in full bloom. Very lovely. And now we can see the Meadowbrook Interpretive Center. This barn was the dairy barn for the McCulloch family. It is where the Park District does environmental programs and events. It is available for those programs. And between the sensory garden and the barn is the Champaign-Urbana herb garden. These gardens are a wonderful place to see color, interact with your the plants with your senses, and then also to observe wildlife. Insects galore, lots of pollinators, but you might also see squirrels and birds, as well as a reptile now and then. And then just beyond the sensory garden is the garden pavilion. We're still on a paved path along what's called the Hickman Wildflower Trail. This area was planted twice over the last 10 to 15 years. The first planting didn't do as well, so in 2015 and 16 the Park District replanted it with the assistance of Peg Richardson Hickman's family. It's meant to look savannish, open forest with lots of prairie plants. In the springtime you can come and see woodland wildflowers. It's just turning from summer and starting to look fall. In fact, here on this tree we have some Virginia creeper that's starting to turn color already. Here's some thistle blooming with a native bumblebee on it. There we go. There's also some teeny tiny beetles. Our friend the bee moved on to another flower. There's another one down below. These animals will not harm you if you don't bother them. Here's a wasp flitting around as well, looking for nectar. You can see the parking lot in the distance. In a closer look, we have some New England aster beginning to bloom. And then over here We have some common sneezeweed blooming. Goldenrod beginning to bloom. A lot of people think that goldenrod is what causes people to sneeze with hay fever and allergies, and that's actually ragweed. Goldenrod is not wind pollinated like ragweed is. Here's some more ironweed growing. Ironweed could grow up to 6 to 7 feet. Here it's about 5 feet. And we have some milkweed. It's a common milkweed with a green pod on it. The monarch butterfly lays its eggs on milkweed. It's what its caterpillars eat. They should be heading south to Mexico for the overwintering. Here we have a seed pod that already opened up. I'm still in the Hickman wildflower area. The trail is to the north here, the hard path trail. I'm on the mowed trail. If I continued on this path, it would take me back to the hardscape path and to the Wandell Sculpture Garden. I'm going to head south across the bridge into the Prairie. This is the McCulloch Creek that starts up at the Windsor Road entrance to the park. All of South Urbana's water comes toward here. It flows southwest through the park, meets up with Douglas Creek right at the Race Street Bridge, heading south out of town. It's pretty low right now because we haven't had sufficient rain in the last couple weeks. This creek has also been a creek area where beaver have been. They come for a few years, overeat their stay, and then leave and come back about every 10 years. Imagine you are a settler from the East Coast coming toward Illinois and Indiana. You leave the woods of the East Coast and come to a sea of grass. The predominant species that you would have seen would have been big blue stem in this part of the country, and that's here, well over 7 or 8 feet. Interesting thing about prairie plants is their roots go down into the earth even longer than the plant goes up toward the sky. Here's a patch of thistle again, being visited by a swallowtail butterfly, as well as some bees. Another name for big blue stem is turkey foot, because the seed and flowering part of it comes off as 3 sections like the foot of a turkey. Along the path, intermixed with the big blue stem, we have some boneset just starting to bloom. I don't see any insects on it just now. There was a wasp just a minute ago. Here we are in an intersection of the path. We came from this direction, from the north. To our east is a newer section of the prairie planted in 1996. To the south is the 1990 and 91 planting. And this path, which we're going to go down, bisects the older section that we just walked past, which was planted in 1978 and 1984. The difference as we come out into the open again is there are more prairie grasses planted in the 1978-84 section, and more forbs or flowering plants, like you can see here, that were planted in the 90s. It was more heavily planted in forbs, where the earlier section was more heavily planted in grasses. Besides some big blue stem and thistle and a little bit of Indian grass, we also have coreopsis, a type of sunflower growing, and a compass plant, which is also in the sunflower family. Notice the flower is facing the east. This plant will orient itself toward the sun. It's a nice way to kind of find yourself direction when you're in the thick of the prairie. Around the park you'll find these little bird houses. They're swallow houses. Notice that there's a rectangular opening for the bird. Swallows spend most of their time flying. They have, it looks like, I haven't seen any, so it looks like they may have already left for winter grounds down south in Central and Southern or South America. Over the path we have some Indian grass that is in bloom. Again, just like the big blue stem, it has yellow flowers. These are wind pollinated. So we've seen common or giant goldenrod, which can be a bit weedy. Next to it though, we have stiff-leafed goldenrod, which is a little less common. Its flowers are all on the top of the plant, where with the common goldenrod they go up and down the stem. It's a bit windy out today. Sorry about that. Kind of gives you the idea of where the prairie sea came from, the term prairie seed. It feels like there's waves going through the prairie with the wind. Haven't seen too many of the purple coneflower. They're almost done. We've got a little bee buzzing around it. There's two types of coneflowers that bloom here at Meadowbrook. There's the pale purple, which usually blooms in June and July, and then the purple coneflower, which blooms in August and September. We've come to another intersection in the path. The path going west here will take you across a small bridge into the Timponi Grove on the west side along Ray Street. We're going to continue north on this path as it'll take us back toward the barns and the parking lot. To our left or west is a Walnut Grove that grows along the McCulloch Creek that we saw earlier. It's a great place to find the deer bedding down. And in June, a great place to find the lightning bugs. Here's another view of the stiff-leaved goldenrod with little beetles. Can't zoom in much more than I already am on it. We'll say goodbye to the prairie as we head out back toward the parking lot. Thanks for joining me.